Hello everybody and welcome. I'm glad to have you all here. I can see some people sneaking into the back seats as we've got started. So let's talk about customer experience, and especially the way that AI can help build our customer experience and enhance our customer experience. Good to see some regular faces here and also some new people. So welcome to everyone. Let me tell you before we get into today's presentation, my 3 standard rules of engagement that I use for all my presentations. So I'd like you to kind of look at this, especially if you're here live, as an opportunity for you to engage so that you can get maximum value from the session, from the time that we've got together. So the first one is I want to give you some things to think about. So please do whatever you can to get rid of any interruptions and distractions and make the most of thinking in this session. And also, can I invite you to think big in this hour that we've got together, and then if you need to kind of step it back when life gets in the way later, that's okay, but think about things that may not even be possible for you in your business at the moment in terms of customer experience or AI or the combination. And the second thing is be a bit playful here. So I'm going to have some questions for you, but I'll give you the chance to ask me questions in the chat as we go. So do as much as you can to make the most of the time that we've got here. If you're watching the recording, hello to you. So you don't get the chance to be playful and engage in this session, but you can still do the exercise yourself and pause the video as we're going in the recording. And the last thing is I want to really give you some things that you can take away and put into place and put into action straight away in your business. And it may not be you that's doing it, but you might be able to share these ideas with other people in your business as well. So today, we're talking about customer experience. So it's more than just customer service. So let me ask, if I ask you in 1 or 2 words about your business, can you type in the chat, how would you describe your customer experience in 1 or 2 words? So for me, for example, as a thought leader, I'm a professional speaker, speak at a lot of conferences, run workshops, do leadership programs. I reckon 1 word that customers would describe me as is responsive. Okay, I'm pretty good at dealing with customers and even being in front of them before they want information and so on. So what word or little phrase would you use to describe yourself and your business in terms from a customer's viewpoint? So I've got supportive. What else? I'll give you a little bit of time. Informative. Custom. Personalized. Okay, let me show this to everyone. Great. Thank you. And thank you for doing this so promptly as well. Really appreciate it. Yeah, you can see here there's a range of responses here, which is fantastic because we've all got a different customer experience that a business is known for. And so today we're going to look at how we can use AI to enhance that experience. And it's going to be different answers for different people. So great. Thank you very much. Excellent. Let me just clear that for us. Okay, so I want to do that right up front because I want you in this session to look at customer experience specifically for yourself and for your business. So this is very much about your business. So we're talking about customer experience and AI, but I've chosen a very particular angle around that, and I shared this in the email that I sent out, which got you here in the room. So I want to make sure that we honor what you came here for, and it's the idea of AI being able to predict things about our customers and our business, which will help us enhance our customer experience. So we'll talk about things like personalization. We'll talk about things like customer intention. We'll talk about things like one-to-one marketing. So you know the old way that that used to walk down to the corner deli, I remember as a kid, and the deli owner would know me and would know my sisters and my brother as well, and he would know exactly what we wanted, and we could have a little bit of a chat about it. As businesses got bigger and you're working at scale, that became harder, and businesses went to grouping customers by segment. AI now allows us to get back to looking at your customers as individuals. In fact, I saw this recently. I went down to my local IGA a couple of days ago and went to the fruit and veg section, and the guy who's there and who I know, he said to me, "Sorry, we've got no broccolini today," because he knew that one of the things I ask for is broccolini, and if it's not on the shelf, he can go and look at the back to see if he can get if they have some in stock. But today, even before I asked for it, he knew what I was going to ask for. So it's that kind of personalization that AI can now do at scale for individuals. Okay, so again, I'd like to know who's in the room. So I'm going to do a little bit of a Where's Wally here. So if you can, I know most people here are from Australia and New Zealand. If you can just type in the chat where you're from. So where are you? It could be a city, it could be a state, and we'll just see where people are. Right, so got people from all around Australia. Fantastic. Great to see. And maybe elsewhere as well, but they don't show up on the map. Excellent. Really good. Really good to see such a representation from around the country. Okay, so let's talk about AI. Let's talk about AI. So I've been using AI for a long time, long before ChatGPT. So when I was studying at the University of Western Australia more than 30 years ago, I did a computer science degree, and my thesis was about AI. So I like to say that I've been following and tracking AI since the 1900s. But of course now everyone knows about AI. And because of generative AI. So since ChatGPT launched, we all know about AI. But AI in customer experience and AI in business has been around for a bit longer than that. So some of the examples I'm going to share with you today are actually things that are well established. They're mature AI technologies. They're not just the latest and greatest things that maybe are more hype than actual reality around it. So please, when you look at some of the tools that are available, don't only think that this has only been around for 18 months. Some of these things have been around for a decade. In fact, I'm going to show you an example later of something that's been around for almost 15 years now with AI in retail. For the people in the room, for us here, I wonder how much you use AI. And I'm talking now not about you as an individual, but think about your business more broadly. On a scale of 1 to 10, how AI powered is your business? So give yourself a rating, and 1 means we're not using AI at all. 10 means we use AI and everything is embedded and integrated into all our processes, and then there's something along the way. There are other things along that spectrum. Yeah, okay, so this is not surprising. So it's between 4 and 5 on average. If I was to ask you, and I'm not asking you, but if I was to ask you, how much do you individually use AI? And when I do this with groups, it's around about 7 or 8 now. Now, it certainly wasn't a year ago, but now most people are using AI, but their organization as a whole isn't necessarily using AI. So their business as a whole may not be, even though you individually might be. And today we're talking about your business as a whole rather than individuals in the business. This guy here, Aravind Srinivas, he's the CEO of Perplexity, which is one of the competitors to ChatGPT. And he did a TED talk last year, and he was talking about the difference between the way we used to get information and the way we do it now. And he said Google is where you used to go to get information. AI is where you go to get answers. And I think that's a really good lens that it's worth keeping in mind when you're thinking about using AI. In fact, I go a step further and say, especially when we're talking about customer experience and predictive AI, it's also about understanding the intention of your customers, sometimes even before they know it themselves. And I'll give you some examples. The other thing that The other thing that you might know, whenever I talk about AI, I always make the point that it's got to be about people first, technology second. Today, it's obviously about that because we're talking about people, your customers, but it's also about your staff and your employees and their careers and AI for them as well. So we'll talk about that as well. When I talk about AI, and some people here, if you've been to some of my presentations before, you know I talk about adopting AI at 4 levels. So at a personal level, which most people are doing now, at a professional level, so this is using ChatGPT or Copilot, just using it as part of your day-to-day work, and then small teams building projects, and then embedded AI platforms. Today, we're going to focus mostly on projects and platforms. So we're not talking about enhancing your customer experience by, I've got an example here, by you got some email from a customer and you asked ChatGPT, how do I reply to this customer with more emotional intelligence than this draft that I've put together? Somebody actually said that to me. A client said, this is how I use AI at the moment. So that's right. And that's a really good way of using it at a professional level. But it's not really talking about AI throughout the organization at the project and platform level. So don't get me wrong, absolutely use it at that professional level, and I reckon you should be educating everybody in your organization to use it that way. But today we'll look at being a little bit more embedded with projects and with platforms. For example, somebody sent me this question or comment when I asked the people who registered. I said, what's the biggest challenge you're facing in customer experience? And this is somebody who's a travel agent, and she said this: in the tourism industry, the travel industry, our clients are looking for different holiday experiences every time. So how can we predict where they might want to go next year? Well, we'll touch on that. We'll talk about that as an example later, because this is an area where you think it's impossible to predict because everyone's going to be different. But there are ways that you can predict not only this, not only where they'll go, but also what sort of other things they might want as part of that whole experience that you give to them. Okay, so we will talk about that. I'll give you an example of an AI project. So this is something that isn't really about predictive AI, but it's an example of a small-scale project that an organization did. One of my clients did, and they've given me permission to share it. It came about because I was demonstrating I've got some AI on one of my websites. So there's a website called Better Meetings. Let me just, I'm not trying to talk about this product in detail, but I'll explain the chatbot bit of this, which is which is the relevant part. So I've got a website which is an online resource center which clients buy, and it's got activities for leaders and managers to run with their teams. So typically somebody comes and sees me speak at a conference, and they say, I would love you to come in and do some work with us, which I'll happily do. But sometimes they can't engage me, or they don't want to engage me to come in and work with their teams. So I've put together this online resource center with 52 activities that team managers and leaders can use with their team. And so people buy it, then they can dip in and use any of the activities here. And I'm not going to go through this in detail because that's not the point, but there's 52 of them here grouped under different categories, so they can choose the ones they want and then just run that activity at their weekly staff meeting. What we did earlier this year was we added a little chat bot to it. So we fed it all the content of those 52 modules, and now somebody who wants some work with their team, they can talk about a challenge that they're having with their team. So let's do one here. My people are worried about high cost of living, which is true right now. Many people are. And what the chatbot does is has a look at those 52 modules and then comes up with the ones that are the best activities that they can use to help that manager address that issue. So it's come up with, I think we said give it 3 at a maximum, and it's got 3 here, right? So it's identified the 3 modules. So then the manager can then pick one of those modules and run that at their weekly staff meeting. So I was sharing this with the client, not because I was trying to sell them the product, but I was demonstrating how you can use a chatbot for something like that. And somebody in the HR team said, this is fantastic. We've got a whole bunch of documents and templates and processes, and these are all really important for us, but the problem is that over time it's become really unwieldy, this massive set of documents. Why don't we build a chatbot? So the HR team just built a little chatbot. It was part of the technology they had now, they had already. So if you're using Microsoft Copilot, it's got this facility built in. And so they built a chatbot that would just work on the HR documents. So now any employee in the business, if they have some sort of HR question, like I applied for a day's leave last year, but I ended up not taking it. How can I get that back? They can type that in the chatbot, and it then directs them to the right document in their internal database that answers that question for them. So it's an example of AI being used to help solve a problem. And the reason I'm sharing this is it wasn't something that had to be done at an organizational level from senior leadership and then buy in some HR package. They actually had a small team build this chatbot within a few weeks. They built a prototype first, then they went to IT and they said, we've tested this on dummy data. How do we now integrate this into our systems? We're making sure we look after cybersecurity and so on. And they had it done in a couple of months. So just a small team doing that to solve a real problem. So some of the things that we talk about today are things that you can do at that level. Some of them they aren't. And the other reason I shared this is because anytime you start using AI, it can also open up some problems. So AI has some great opportunities when you use it, but can also open up some problems. So here's an example of a chatbot that caused some problems. So this is a real story, came out about a few years ago now, a couple of years ago, with Air Canada. So Air Canada, like many other large organizations, has a chatbot on its website. So you can go to the website and you can ask, a chatbot pops up and says, can I help you with anything? So the story was that there was a guy in Canada who had to travel to another province. So he was taking a flight on Air Canada, and it was actually for a bereavement. He was going for a funeral, and he knew that Air Canada offers bereavement fares as on compassionate grounds, and he knew that he could get a fare at a discount. So he went to the Air Canada chatbot, a website, and the chatbot came up, and he asked about bereavement fares and whether he could qualify, and the chatbot said, yep, absolutely you can. All you do is buy your ticket, and then when you get back, apply for this bereavement discount or refund. So he'd get part of his fare refunded. So he did that, but when he came back and he tried to apply for that, Air Canada said to him, no, that's not the way it works. You have to actually apply for that before you start your journey. And he said that's not what the chatbot said. And he had taken screenshots of the chatbot responses, and Air Canada said, no, doesn't matter what the chatbot said. This is a very clear policy on our website. So he actually sued them, or he took them to a mediation tribunal, because Air Canada said, no, we're not going to do that because the website is what he should have gone to. And the tribunal fairly reasonably said, well, you have a chatbot. How was he supposed to know that the website would be different from the chatbot, and he had to check? And so Air Canada's defense was the chatbot is a completely different entity from us. And so if anyone's to blame, you need to sue the chatbot to get your money back. Now, it's a ridiculous situation. And the good news is the tribunal ruled in his favor. So he got his discount. I mean, I think most people here would say, if you're talking about customer experience, they should have just given him the discount anyway, right? Rather than going through this whole dispute and making international news headlines. But this is an issue that happened because Air Canada created a chatbot to help their customers, but it also opened them to risk because the chatbot was giving advice that wasn't necessarily the correct advice. So as we go through, I'm going to give you some examples of AI being used well, but also some cautionary tales about things that you need to think about when you start implementing it. Okay, So, as I said, we're talking about predictive AI here. I want to do a little experiment here. And we're going to do it in the chat, and I'm going to ask you please to listen to the instructions carefully and follow the instructions that I've got for you exactly to try and make this as fair as possible. So I'm going to ask you to think of a random number from 1 to 50. Okay, so from 1 to 50, think of a number, and now listen carefully please. I'm going to ask you to type the number in the chat, but don't press enter. Okay, so if your number was 42, you type 42 in the chat, but don't press enter just yet. And then I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, go, and everyone press enter at the same time, just so you're not influenced by what you see other people typing in. All right, so everyone's got their number. Please type it in the chat. Don't press enter just yet. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. All right, let's see what we get. And it's a random number, right? So we should get a range everywhere, right? We should get a range of numbers. And if it's truly random, and if we had a much larger group, you'd expect that things would come out randomly. Okay, thank you everyone for doing that. So it looks like there's a couple of numbers which are quite big. There's 36, 27, 33. So I made a prediction before we started today. It's been sitting there on my shelf here, and I predicted that the number you would choose as the most popular would be 27. Ta-da, ta-da. Okay, so how to do that, right? So here's the way it works. And 27, as you saw, was one of the most popular numbers. The reason that works and that my prediction was correct is because if you ask people to choose a random number between 1 and 50, they don't choose a completely random number. So typically people don't choose 1, 2, or 3. It doesn't seem really close to the end. They wouldn't choose 48, 49, 50. They might not choose a number with the same digits. So if you ask people to choose a random number, they will, like the research shows that the most common number they get is 27. Okay, which is how I came up with my prediction there. And by the way, the second most random is 37. So I had that one prepared as well, just in case you came up with that one. And the third most common is 42. But I kind of poisoned the world there by talking about 42 up front to try and get you not to choose that. And as you saw here, most people I don't think anyone chose that one there. Okay, so what's the point here? The point here is not just that I can do cool magic tricks on online presentations, but this is what happens with AI. So AI gathers huge amounts of data about us, and then using that can make predictions. In fact, if you go to ChatGPT or Copilot on any of the other AI tools and ask it, if you say, give me a random number from 1 to 50, there's a pretty good chance it'll give you 27. Okay, not because it's broken and it can't give you proper random numbers, but because it's been trained on huge amounts of data from people. And so it's not picking a real random number, it's picking the number that many people would choose if they were asked for a random number. So the point I'm making is that we like to think that we're unique and everybody's different, and we absolutely are, but we're more alike than we like to think. And so the way that predictive AI works is it makes decisions based on what it knows about people in the world. And even if it knows a tiny bit about us, then it can still make predictions about what we'll do because we're very much like other people. Okay, I hope you're not disappointed that you're not as random and not as unique as you might think. All right, so let's look at some real examples here. So I'm going to break this down into three areas, three really broad areas here. So marketing, if you think about marketing as how you get people into your business, and then selling or sales, which is now you've got them in the business, how do you get them to buy things from you and maybe buy more from you and upsell and so on. And the third area is AI being used in your operation. So not necessarily customer facing, but still to help the customer experience. These are three broad categories. Don't get too hung up on exactly which category is which, especially marketing and sales. Some people will talk about some of the selling stuff I talk about that I'm going to describe as marketing rather than sales. That's okay, that's fine. But we'll talk about these three categories. So let's start with this marketing one. And as we go, I'll stop and you can ask me questions as well. So at the end of each of these 3 segments. Okay, let me share a story, which is an AI story. Okay, let me share this story. It's an AI story from almost 15 years ago now. And it's from Target, which is a retail chain in the US, very similar to our Target here in Australia, completely different company, but the similar sort of business. And in about 2012, they got into trouble because they sent a teenage girl a mail order catalogue. This is in the old days when they were still sending things in the post. They sent her mail order catalogue that was full of maternity and baby products. And her parents were shocked and outraged. And the dad took the catalogue, marched up to his local Target store and said to the manager, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to get my daughter pregnant?" It turned out she was already pregnant. She just hadn't told her parents yet. And this is a huge news story. It made the New York Times at the time. Because what happened was Target was doing very, very early versions of AI to do data analysis to find out what pregnant women typically buy and how they change their buying patterns before they give birth. And it's not stuff like, are they buying baby clothes and cots and things like that, or maternity dress. And they're talking about like what sort of food choices that they're making differently. They tended to buy start buying unscented lotions and things like that. And so Target guessed that maybe she was pregnant, and they thought it was worthwhile sending her a catalogue of maternity and baby products. Okay, and that was a huge controversy at the time. And now we know this. If we've got Coles Flybys, or if we've got Woolies Rewards, like I'm one of the 14 million Woolies Rewards members around Australia, and we know that when we're using our rewards cards, we're getting some benefits, but also AI behind the scenes is trying to predict what we might want to buy in the future. And in many ways we accept it, and sometimes we even expect it rather than being upset about it, okay, as long as you know about it. So we're talking here about personalized prediction. So you're trying to predict what your customers will do in the future. It's a bit of a fuzzy line there, as you can see. It's not perfect, but if you can make a prediction that's got a good chance of being correct, and you go, oh, I'm going to predict 27, and that turns out to be right, great. And if it turns out not to be right, no big deal, right? Because it's not the only thing that you're predicting about them. Okay, so let me go back to that example from that travel agent, Julie. I won't give her full name, but Julie asked this question about in the travel industry. So how can you predict if a client of mine traveled to Europe last year, traveled to Thailand this year, what you're going to do next year? What should I predict for her next year? Is it going to be a safari in Namibia? Or maybe that's where she wants to go, but how can I have predicted that? So the thing is, again, because AI is trained on vast amount of data, and we like to think that we're making our decision completely independently, we are very much like other people. And there will be other people who went to Europe last year, who went to Thailand this year, and want to go on a safari in Namibia next year. So AI might be able to predict that might be something they're interested in. So when they send out when the travel agent sends out the newsletter, instead of it being the same newsletter for everybody, it can be customized individually based on what the AI knows about that customer and also customers like them. And it'll send out a newsletter with not just one thing, but might have three possible travel destinations. And the customer will look at that and go, oh, wow, never thought about a safari, but that's pretty good. Never been to Africa before and haven't done the safari experience, but that could be good. Right? And that is a prediction that AI could have made. There's software that does this, for the travel industry. There's a bunch of software. Here's just one of them. I'm not necessarily recommending any of this software, but it is available already. Okay, so this is the idea of predictive analytics. So using AI to predict what your customers are going to do in the future. In fact, there's some research done about in this area. There's quite a lot of research now coming out. Twilio did some research. Let's do this as a poll, actually. What percentage of businesses are already using predictive analytics for their customer experience. So you've got 4 options there. A, B, C, or D. So type in the chat and the letter, don't type in the number. So is it 25%, 50%, 75%, or 90%? Let's see. Okay, so the most popular response is C. So 75% of people or businesses are already using predictive analytics. And the correct answer is that one, correct? And the first person to get that, Kate, congratulations. So the Twilio research actually said 76%. So 3 out of 4 businesses are already using predictive analytics to try and understand their customers' intentions for the future and using that in their marketing to get them into the business. Okay. So before I stop for questions, let me tell you one cautionary tale about that, because predictive AI is not perfect. It's not perfect. And it sometimes gets things wrong, and sometimes it doesn't matter because you send out a newsletter with 3 options and one of them might work, but sometimes none of those 3 are of interest to the customer, but that's okay. But sometimes it has real world consequences. So here's a story about Apple. Apple brought out a credit card in about 2019, and it was great fanfare and just talking about it's looking after privacy and not having a credit card number that could be stolen and so on. But there was a controversy around that, because there was this tech entrepreneur, this guy who applied for one of the Apple credit cards, and he and his wife both applied for credit cards and they both got approved. But to their shock, they found that even though their finances were pretty much exactly the same, he got a credit limit approved which was 20 times greater than hers, even though their finances were pretty much exactly the same. So the only thing different in the application was the gender. And so they complained to Apple, and Apple said, oh, no, it's probably because she's got a lower credit rating. So they looked up her credit score. She actually had a higher credit rating than her husband, but it turned out that Apple's AI still gave him a 20 times higher credit limit. And so then, of course, again, the story made international headlines. The city of New York actually did an investigation into the Apple's credit card, because they are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of gender. And Apple, of course, said, no, we don't discriminate that way. But, of course, the proof of the pudding was in the eating in this case, that there was that evidence. And the other interesting thing about this is that AI bias was in their software that was trying to determine what would be an appropriate credit rating. But the other interesting thing around this is, if that story hadn't come out, if that husband and wife had not told their story and coincidentally happened to apply and then found this bias, nobody may have even known about this ever happening. So somebody, like if she applied by herself and she got her credit card, a limit which is pretty low, but still okay, she might have gone, oh, that's okay, I don't mind that. So sometimes there's bias in AI that's very obvious, and sometimes it's not obvious, and yet it can still cause problems. So it's a challenge, it's something to think about. Okay, so let me stop for questions and see if there's comments in the chat as well. Okay, Ivan. Hello, Ivan. Good to see you here. So it's like banks in the 60s. Males got approved. She would not have got credit. I think it's only in the late 1970s that women in Australia, that women could even apply for credit by themselves anyway. So yes, so we've had this bias, and that bias has been built into AI databases. The training that's been done, AI is trained on huge amounts of data, and sometimes it's based on data from the past, and it reflects those biases and discrimination, which were legal at the time. Sometimes they weren't legal, but they happened anyway. And so that's reflected in the way that some of the AI models work now, unless you intentionally work to overcome those. Okay, let me see if there's any other questions or comments in the chat. Please ask away. Then the next section, which is we're talking about sales, is going to be related to this. So you might have a question now, but you might think about it's more relevant in the next section. That's fine. So David says, how do you manage the issues with hallucinations and unwanted responses? AI chat is built and managed by IT, but the product owner should be supported. So this is it's really important that if you've got any sort of customer-facing AI, that you think and work really carefully at making sure that it's accurate in every way. So for example, that HR chatbot that I mentioned earlier, which was the one that was that this organization built. So there are a couple of little safeguards in there. So one is it was internal, so that if there was something that it hallucinated about, it gave an unwanted response, then it wasn't external facing, it wasn't customer facing. It's still like employee facing, which is still pretty bad, right? And the second thing is that the chatbot didn't give an answer, it gave a link to an internal document that then the employee would go to read. Okay, so it was more of a search facility like Google, which gives you a link to web pages, rather than giving the answer straight away. So these are sort of safeguards you need to put into place. And most organizations who are looking at AI seriously for customer experience are doing that. Some of them aren't. Some of them aren't. And it's a problem for them. Ivan's question, how can we use predictive AI to find opportunities our customers may not see in their markets? Yeah, so I think, Ivan, you're talking here in the context of you're helping your customers find new opportunities, right? Rather than your customer experience dealing with you. Can I just check that that's right first? Okay. Yeah, okay. So you absolutely can. It's a different context from what I'm talking about customer experience here, Ivan. But absolutely, there are tools now that you can use to AI tools that you can run at your end, which the customers themselves could do, but it would help them see opportunities. So it's one of the things I do now whenever I work with leadership teams and I'm doing some scenario planning or other high-level leadership work. One of the things I do is use AI to do a deep market analysis of their business, their organization, their industry, and other external trends. So if I can do a little bit of an ad here, so the next public presentation that I'm doing like this coming up in a few weeks time is going to be about exactly that, is how you use AI to see into the future. It's actually not just only about AI, but it's called Seeing into the Future, and is helping leaders and leadership teams do exactly that. So come back next time as well, Ivan. So yes, we will talk about that next time. Ivan says, thank you for that, Ivan. Appreciate that. Ivan says you're always ahead of the game. Thanks, mate. Okay, let's look at this second area. So we spent quite a bit of time on that first area and the introduction because I wanted to give you some broad concepts. Let's look at this second area here, which won't take as much time. Same for the third area. I'm just going to give you a few examples of, in this case with selling, it's what people call hyper-personalized marketing. So it's like, you can call it marketing or sales, it doesn't really matter. It's when you have got your customers already engaged, how can you personalize the marketing? And you may go, well, Gihan, didn't we already talk about that earlier? And we kind of did. So there's a bit of an overlap here. But you know this happens already. You know this happens in things like Spotify, which has the Spotify for you. I forget what it's called now, Spotify. There's your personalized Spotify playlist. Spotify was the first of the streaming media companies that did that on a big scale. Okay, and now you have a personalized playlist based on your behavior, your preferences, how often you play a piece of music, how long you played for, as well as other people who've got similar music taste to you, which Spotify knows. It'll create their personalized playlist that way. So does Netflix and all of the streaming media, the streaming video companies like Netflix. So your Netflix is personally curated for you based on Netflix algorithm, even to the extent that when you see the cover of a TV or like what we used to call DVD covers, they'll be customized for you as well. They don't have like billions of them, millions of them, but they might choose from 5 different covers, and they'll choose the one that you're most likely to click on or be interested in. So that's not people buying from you. They've already got you as a captive subscriber. But there are other companies like Amazon who've been doing this for a long time. You buy something and it says customers who bought this also bought this. or customers like you might be interested in this. So these are some online examples, but we know this happens in the bricks and mortar world as well. So supermarkets like Coles and Woolies, they do this all the time. So I get my weekly email from Woolies with my specials for the week. It's no longer something that's been sent out in my letterbox, but it's customized for me based on the things that I buy and the things that it thinks that Woolies thinks I'm likely to buy. And then it has special offers based on how much I spend each week, and that amount always happens to be a tiny bit more than my typical weekly spend, because Woolies trying to get me to upsell me to spend more money with them. Airlines are starting to do this. They haven't done it to that same extent as Coles and Woolies, but they could, couldn't they? They could customize fares based on what they know about you. There are some stories about, some controversial stories about airlines doing that. In fact, there was probably about a decade ago now, where they said that they would quote higher prices to Apple users because they can see when you visit their website whether you're using a Mac or a PC, and they figured that Apple users have higher disposable incomes, and so they would quote slightly higher prices to them. So again, like, you wonder, is that ethical or not? I think it's not ethical, but again, we'll talk a little bit about ethics later on as well. Okay, so I want to know, like, how personalized do you think your marketing is? I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10. And so we're not talking about you as an individual, we're talking about your business. So 10 would be something like, we're sending out every one of our customers gets 100% tailored marketing. 1 would be we just send out mass marketing to everyone, and then there'll be a scale along the way. Okay, so how personalized is your marketing? Right, so the number's really low, right? So there's a huge potential for you to look at AI tools and platforms that will help you make your marketing more personalized. Okay, so yep, like an average is 3. As you do this, as I said, I'll give you a cautionary tale for each of these. So here's one with 7-Eleven Australia. So they tried to get some customer feedback. Really good idea. So the really good idea they had was when customers came into a 7-Eleven store, before they walked out, somebody would say to them, can you give us some feedback? Give them an iPad with a survey for them to fill out, which is a good idea, really good idea to get that feedback. What was not such a good idea is that the app that they were using on the iPad would secretly take a photo of that customer while they were doing the survey, because 7-Eleven doesn't have those sort of loyalty programs like Coles, Woolies and Aldi do, and so they could then use that facial recognition technology to track when the customer came back next time, and then make offers based on that. But of course, it was a huge privacy breach, and they were forced to, because of Australia's privacy laws, get rid of that. And the main problem was not the privacy breach, but the fact that they didn't ask for consent, or the consent was not very clear, and that's what the courts ruled. So just be careful when you're doing this hyper-personalized marketing that you're doing it with consent, and that you're compliant with everything that's happening that you're compliant with everything that you're required to do, as well as everything that's happening within your industry, to make sure that you're not an outlier in your industry doing some things that customers would see as dodgy. Okay, let me see if there's questions have come in. I see lots of things have scrolled, so let me just scroll back and see some. Yeah, Crystal's talking about these ideas like when you use somebody else's account on Netflix or Amazon Prime or on Spotify, and suggest things that aren't relevant to you. Yeah, okay. So, for example, at the place like YouTube do this. So if you want to do a simple experiment for yourself, go to your YouTube account, youtube.com, and then be logged in and see what it comes up with, and then open up an incognito tab on your web browser and go to YouTube logged out and see what it comes up, and see what it recommends on the right hand side, and you'll see the recommendations are quite different because YouTube customizes everything for you, for better or worse, sometimes for worse. Okay, let's look at this third area, because I don't see any other questions coming just yet. Okay, this third area is, we won't spend a lot of time on this, but I want to give you some examples of AI being used within your business operations. So what I mean by that, you might say everything we've talked about is AI in business operations, but think of it for external customer facing roles, which is what we've talked about so far, versus what you can do, what you can use AI, predictive AI for within your operations that will help you enhance your customer experience. So because all of it's in the service of customers, right? If you're not doing anything in the service of customers, maybe you should reconsider that. So here's an online example. The Iconic. It's a large Australian online retail brand, and they do lots of stuff that we've talked about already, but they also use AI behind the scenes. One little example, so they use AI to predict the likely return rate of different products based on the data that they've got, and so that they can look after their inventory management and their stocking and so on, and also manage their cash flow based on what they're expecting in terms of returns. Here are some examples from the bricks and mortar world. So 1/3 of food is that's produced by people is wasted around the world. 1/3. Okay, so 1 in 3 things is wasted. So there's this company called 1/3 based on that stat, and they've got a scanner that you can scan fruit and veg to determine and predict how likely they are, how long they're going to be fresh and saleable. So then they can discount things, and short date things if they need to. Here's another example. So does anyone know about the Colombian banana disruption of early 2024? Well, Helios does. Helios is a company that works with, again, the food industry, and it makes predictions based on things like commodity prices, global events, geopolitical events, tariffs presumably, weather events, and then notifies their customers, or customers who are using the software can then make decisions about how much they import and how much they buy for their own organizations, for their businesses, using this Helios predictive AI. Here's another example at a smaller scale, but it's just as important. Loman AI is an AI that restaurants can use to customize their menus, because restaurants know what items are ordered off the menu because they're on receipts and in their records, and they know what's ordered, what's popular at a certain time, and the Loman AI uses that data to advise the restaurant owner of maybe you should take this off the menu or add this on, or this is really popular at the moment, it should be a special, and so on. Here's a non-food based example. This is a Japanese company that is creating AI for the aviation industry, for airlines and for planes, and it's using predictive AI to try and predict when a plane is flying through turbulence. So I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we've flown and there's a bit of turbulence, and then you might get the warning, the captain saying, fasten seatbelts. Well, this predicts it ahead of time in ways that the crew can't see. The pilot and co-pilot can't see that based on just what's out in front of them, but the AI can predict that, so that one or two things happen. So one is they might rise or fall to avoid the turbulence, or they can tell passengers ahead of time, tell the crew to stop their dining service because there's turbulence coming up. Okay, so this is AI that's being used for predictive purposes within the operation. So none of these are customer facing directly, but they do have an influence on your customer experience overall. So let me ask you a question here, and you can type this in the chat. Actually, before I do that, let me quickly check what's in the chat. Okay, I get ads popping up on my phone. It is relevant to my role in marketing? Is it done through cookies or is it AI behind the scenes? From Scott. Hello, Scott. Good to see you here as well. It could be either, Scott. I don't know. So the earlier version before AI was to have cookies that would follow you around. You know, you go on social media or you go to a website and then you see ads for that popping up all the time. That's called targeted advertising, and it didn't require AI. But now AI is getting much smarter at that. Chris says, how do you anticipate the next generations and use case of training AI, personalized sales? So I think there's going to be this, there already is a huge amount of AI being used to help salespeople, because as Chris says, there's so much material now that millennials and Gen Zs, and interestingly enough, older people are also willing to share. So some research says that Gen Xers and Boomers are just as willing to share their personal data as long as they understand what it's being used for and the benefit that it gives them. So given that, you learn a lot more about the people that you're engaging with. Today we're talking about customers, so you learn a lot more about your customers. So there is going to be more of this personalized sales happening. It's already happening, even to the extent where a salesperson's making a sales call and there's AI listening in on that call and then providing advice to that salesperson in the call itself. David says, do you feel that there should be a dedicated AI manager role versus a subset of each manager's functions? No, I don't, David. I know this is not the consensus opinion from everyone talking about AI, but in my opinion, no, we don't need an AI manager or a chief AI officer. AI should be embedded everywhere in your organization's infrastructure, just as you don't need a chief Google officer. Now, you might need a chief technology officer because they're responsible for all the tech within the organization, but AI, I don't think should be something that is seen as a role that the chief AI officer or the AI department is responsible for. It should be something that everybody feels that is part of their responsibility as well. In the same way as when I first started work in the 1990s, R&D or innovation was the R&D department's responsibility, but now innovation is everyone's responsibility, and I think the same should be true of AI as well. Let me just get off my soapbox there. Okay, but yes, I think thank you for the question, but I think that's the way that we should be looking at AI. Tom's asked a question about AI for Hive. That's not really relevant about customer experience, Tom. So, well, the question is around Airbnb. I reckon Airbnb is using AI for the way that it works with its hosts and its guests and as part of their customer experience. I don't think it's otherwise relevant to today. Okay, I want to, just before we finish, I do want to touch on this idea of governance, which is looking at AI and looking at the guardrails and the rules you put in your organization around AI. Can I ask, does anybody know what this Latin phrase means? Primum non nocere or nocere, depending on what version of Latin you speak. Does anyone know what that means? Okay. Samantha, correct. So first, do no harm. Okay, and this is given to medical students. It's still part of the ethics that medical students go through when they do their medical degree. And some people think it's part of the Hippocratic Oath, but that's just kind of a urban legend that's been built up because it is given to medical students. First, do no harm. And I reckon that's a pretty good way for you to start thinking about your AI governance. I went to I went to an industry event last week called Digital Transformation Perth, and they run these regular events. And I went to one that was run by the RAC. So in Western Australia, it's called RAC. It's like RACV, RACQ, and RMA. It's that the motor vehicle body, but also offer a whole bunch of other insurance. And the guest speaker there was from the RAC at this event. He's Bobby Patel. He's a head of data and analytics, and I've worked with RSC before, so they are one of my clients, full disclosure. And Bobby was talking about the way that they are very, very data positive and AI positive in the organization. He had plenty of examples of how they're using data and AI through every part of their organization. And in the Q&A at the end, somebody asked him a question about, is there anything that he wouldn't use data and AI for? And he said this: we won't use AI for that because it goes against our mission. And that he was talking about is the call centers. So if you're a customer or a member of RAC, and I am, so I've experienced this, if you call one of their call centers, they have a call center in Perth, staffed completely by people. Now, the people use AI behind the scenes so they can get information about the customer, they can get information about the policies while they're on the phone to the customer. But Bobby said we would never replace the people in the call center with AI. And he said the reason it goes against our vision is part of our mission is to be an integral part of supporting the Western Australian community, because we're RAC based in WA. And if we were to put people out of work, that would go against that mission. It's not about the business, it's also about part of our mission. And I reckon that's a really good way to start thinking about your governance. I might sometime in the future do a presentation all about governance and AI, but I reckon the way to get started when you start thinking about AI is to go, what are our values? And then how can we make sure that everything we do with AI is consistent with and aligned with those values? Okay, so I'm going to ask you, the last little bit I've got for you is I'm going to give you some examples of things that you might think about when you're talking about governance. And you've seen examples of these already. So risk. I spoke about that example of Air Canada's chatbot inadvertently causing risk. We talked about fairness with the Apple credit card. We talked about privacy and consent when we were talking about the 7-Eleven cameras, iPads. Then other things like transparency. Do you need to tell your customers that you're using AI? You don't have to. You don't have to. But is it something that's going to be important for your customers? Explainability. If your customer gets denied for a loan, a home loan, because the computer said no, are you able to explain why the AI said no? Compliance. Are there regulations that you need to conform with, like legal regulations as well as industry regulations? And I think the biggest one of them, which is why I put it in bigger letters, is your staff. Like, are you looking after your employees using AI? So one of the top 10 things that employees want from a workplace now is to help, is an AI-enabled workplace where they can work in that they can work using AI, but also they want their leaders and managers and the culture to embrace AI and teach them more about AI. Because look, they're not going to be there forever. The average time in one workplace in Australia at the moment is 3 years. So they want growth opportunities as well for their next workplace. Otherwise, they won't pick this one. Okay, so are you thinking about these things in your organization? I'm going to ask you, if you were to pick any one of those or something else, which of those do you think is going to be super important for your governance? If you had to pick only one, there may be more than one, but just type in the chat. Which of these do you think is most important for your business? Right, okay, so compliance is the one that's coming up as number one at the moment. Not surprising. Not surprising. I've worked with, like, the aged care sector. I've done quite a bit of work with them over the last couple of months, and that's an area where compliance is super important. Same with anywhere in healthcare, same with financial services. So yeah, compliance and transparency. As I said, it's not just one. It could be multiple ones. So I only asked you to pick one there. But yes, think about all of these things as you're considering what you're going to do with governance for AI. So one little story before I finish. It's almost 20 years now since I moved to the Gold Coast. So I lived for a year on the Gold Coast in beautiful Coolangatta, and I took surfing lessons. Unfortunately, I could only take 2 because I played squash and did something to my shoulder, so I couldn't go surfing. But I remember going to the first lesson, standing on the beautiful Coolangatta beach, which some people here are familiar with, I'm sure. And the instructor we had a small group of about 8 of us, and we were just getting started. And I asked a question. I said, if you're standing here on the beach and you're looking out into the water, what sort of things should you be looking for to see where when a good wave's coming, or when any wave's coming? Because I was a rank beginner. And he said, look, your first mistake is that you don't stand on the beach looking out for the waves. What surfers do is they get into the water, and only when you're in the water can you catch a wave. If you're standing on the beach and you see a good wave, it's too late. It's too late. And I reckon this is really important for all of us. There are a lot of people just standing on the sidelines, waiting to get started, looking for the next best thing. And you can't do that. You've actually got to get out there, start using AI, start using it in small ways, do little pilot projects, experiment, educate your team with it, and then you can be comfortable with starting to use some of these platforms that we've talked about today. And one of my favorite quotations from Benjamin Brewster in the 1800s, he said, in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice, there is. So if you've got some good ideas from today, please don't just let them be theoretical ideas or things that you can do in your head. Put them into practice. Start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. And if you don't get started, your competitors are already getting a jump on you. So good luck with your AI journey, good luck with your customer experience journey, and good luck combining them all together. Thanks everyone for coming along today, and thanks everyone for engaging in the chat, and have a great day. I'll see you in the future. Bye for now.